Hi, welcome back to ITC568. Today we're going to look at some guidance for Assignment 5. Okay, Assignment 5 is a strategy for security, privacy and resilience, worth 20%, due the 18th of October, and again 4,000 words plus or minus 10%. So we know the scenario for DR alarms doesn't really change at this stage. We know it's manufacturing in Hanoi, in Vietnam. It's distributing its alarm products from there. It has now established a footprint with a company in Germany, in the EU, and it is now going to start providing monitoring services for end users. So as we see, this gives them a somewhat strategic advantage. They can use the AWS edge locations to pick up data and move it back to central locations for monitoring, or whatever it is they decide. So they plan to start monitoring with New Zealand in early 2022, and then they'll add a new country about every 3 months or so. The data will be provided to the end users so that the end users can manage their own data, but they'll also be used by DR alarms to help improve their product range. So the DR Alarms Board has looked at the analysis report that you've done on potential strategic options, and they now want to develop a security strategy that's going to provide for 4 things: data protection across the company and all of its different storage sites in AWS, as well as their on-premise data set. They need to look at privacy loss protection across the company, and again in the different storage sites and their data center, with an emphasis on ensuring that all the relevant privacy regulations in each country where they operate, they are compliant with. They want to look at data sovereignty protection for their IoT and ICS design data, and they want to look at data resilience for all data. So that's the strategies that you'll be looking at. So again, you have to provide a report to the MD of DR Alarms to outline a strategy for data protection across the company and for the different storage sites used by DR Alarms. And of course, you need to provide reasoning for that. So this is not the strategy, this is the outline of it, because it will then go to the board, they will talk it out with you, and there may be some final changes before the strategy is finalized. Okay, so don't be tempted to be using templates or anything here. You are writing a report. The second question outlines your strategy, again with reasoning, to do privacy loss prevention across the company and of course those different storage sites. And here you have to ensure that your strategy allows DR Alarms to comply with all the different relevant privacy legislation for each country where they're operating. The third question, you have to outline the strategy with reasoning again for data sovereignty for the DR Alarms IoT and ICS design data in particular. And you also need to outline a strategy with reasoning again for data resilience for all data in the various different storage sites that are used by DR Alarms. So as you can see, you've got a fairly good mix of issues that you're going to have to cover here. So let's go through these one at a time. Firstly, as we said, a report using these headings: data protection strategy, privacy loss prevention strategy, data sovereignty strategy, data resilience strategy. And again, you need to use the APA 7th edition style referencing. Okay, so question 1, you're now deep in the heart of this subject with this assignment. So what you're doing is you're taking all that stuff that you've learned now and starting to use that to develop strategies that DR Alarms can use to protect their data. So in this question, you're going to outline the strategy that you're going to recommend to protect the data they have in the different storage sites, both in AWS as well as in their on-premise data. So that strategy has to cover both of those aspects, right? You've got to also account for the differences in location and management for each storage site, because remember, some of the sites you don't manage. It's in AWS, you don't have full management of. You've also got to look at the various threats and risks that you've identified. And so you will need to use that security approach you recommended in A4 to show how your strategy is going to protect these different data sites. So some hints for these questions, for this particular question in particular. Make sure you discuss how your strategy will mitigate the various threats and risks that you've shown up in the earlier assignments. Ensure that you also show how that strategy will protect the different data storage sites. And of course, if you're referencing your, if you're using your earlier work, then you need to reference it. So make sure you've got that referenced as well. Question 2. This is the strategy for privacy loss prevention. So again, remember you've got a series of different storage locations. So this needs to tie in with your strategy that's come out of question 1. So you might also want to consider here, are you going to do a single global strategy of privacy controls, or are you going to do separate controls for each country of operation, because they may all have different requirements, which you will know as a result of your earlier assignments. So again, you discuss how this strategy will mitigate those threats and the risks that you identified in assignment 2, and show how it's going to work for those different data storage sites and countries. So again, the hints, make sure you also talk about the various threats and risks identified in your earlier assignments to privacy. Okay, you need to discuss how this strategy is going to affect and mitigate those. So don't forget to include that. In question 3, you're now asked to outline a data sovereignty strategy. So your work in assignment 4 will be quite valuable here, because you'll need to develop your strategy and show how you plan to protect data that's based in US cloud-based storage and different edge locations, and how's that going to affect data sovereignty. Don't forget, you've also got to consider the needs of that IoT and design data, as well as the end user monitoring data that DR Alarms will start to collect shortly. So this is really a quite topical issue for a lot of organisations, and this is where you've got to start to think about, how can I resolve this kind of wicked problem? Now, if you're not sure what a wicked problem is, I've got a quote here from, which I used to use on another subject, ITC504, from interactiondesign.org, where they define a wicked problem as a social or cultural problem that's difficult or impossible to solve, normally because of its complex and interconnected nature. So wicked problems lack clarity in both their aims and solutions, and are subject to real-world constraints which hinder risk-free attempts to find a solution. Gee, it kind of sounds like the problem we've got in front of us, doesn't it? It's an interesting one. Can be a real wicked problem. So again, the hints I would give you on this one, make sure that you think through this strategy logically. Make sure you understand the aim of this strategy and what data you have that is absolutely essential to protect with this strategy. And of course, reference your earlier work, particularly your work in A3 and A4. Okay, that's essential. Question 4. You've now got to consider a strategy for data resilience, which we haven't really talked about except perhaps in passing a bit. So data resilience can be considered the ability of data to be able to spring back if it's compromised. So, you know, that's getting things back to working fairly quickly. So if we need to look at more than just simple data protection here, you might want to consider a range of different resilience factors such as backup, DR, HA, high availability, alternate sites, etc. So this is kind of free rein here. You've got to look at what you've got in place. You've done some work on this in one of the other assignments. You might want to go back and review that as well. But one of the only real hint I'll give you here is make sure this strategy is going to work with your other strategies, okay? Because they've all got to form this combined whole. So it's quite an interesting one. So again, the general hints, make sure you read the case study carefully. There's lots of bits in there that you need to consider. Make sure you read the marking criteria to see what we're looking for in each question, because that'll also give you some ideas around approach. Go back to your notes. By now you should have extensive notes on privacy requirements, different storage specifications, security, process, etc. These will probably be a lifesaver for you. Remember, we're looking for clarity and brevity in your report, but not at the expense of logical thinking and expression. And don't forget your references and include your previous work if you intend to refer to it. Okay, as we've looked at earlier, DR Alarms is expanding, and rapidly so, which brings its own problems. And this assessment now further extends that interesting example into the sort of problem that you may well find in your own workplace, developing a strategy. This is the heart of the subject. As you can see now, there are a large range of issues that we've got to consider. We have to research them, we've considered them carefully so that we can make good decisions, particularly when you've got a cloud ecosystem involved, and even more so if you've got global partners. It's the sort of problem you may well get in the workplace. I wish you the best with it. It's a good, interesting problem, and I think you'll probably enjoy it once you get into it.